Eddie hated mornings, especially mornings like this. The piercing shriek of the training alarm dragged him from his sleep. Each day at boot camp was worse than the last. He longed for his old life, his friends, his family. "What am I doing here?" he mumbled. The answer was simple: survival. Earth was under threat. Strange and terrifying alien races called Zendar, Ikrani, and Skaran had declared war. Eddie, like millions of others, had volunteered to fight. He wanted to protect his loved ones. He wanted to make a difference. But fear gnawed at his resolve. Eddie stumbled out of bed and into the rigorous routine. Push-ups, squats, target practice. Every muscle screamed in protest. Sergeant Keller, their drill instructor, barked orders. Keller was a mountain of a man with a voice like thunder. He pushed the recruits to their limits and beyond. Eddie gritted his teeth, determined to prove himself. He wouldn't be the weak link, not this time. Sergeant Keller ran a tight ship. He drilled them relentlessly in hand-to-hand combat. He taught them how to assemble and fire energy rifles. Eddie discovered a hidden talent for strategy during their tactical simulations. He could anticipate enemy movements and devise counterattacks. Keller noticed. He began singling Eddie out, pushing him harder. "You've got a good head on your shoulders, soldier," Keller growled one day after a particularly grueling session. "Don't waste it." The praise, however gruff, meant the world to Eddie. It ignited a spark of confidence within him. He wasn't just surviving boot camp, he was excelling. The threat of the alien invaders loomed over everything. News reports showed their terrifying might. The Zendar were a reptilian species with advanced weaponry. The Ikrani possessed psychic abilities that could crush a man's will. The Skaran were hulking brutes, driven by an insatiable hunger. Fear was a constant companion, but so was determination. They had to be ready, they had no choice. The training took a turn. Gone were the days of endless drills. Now the focus shifted to their enemies. They studied holographic projections of the Zendar, Ikrani, and Skaran. They learned their strengths and weaknesses, their tactics and technologies. Knowledge, Keller stressed, was their greatest weapon. Eddie immersed himself in the material. He devoured every bit of information, committing it to memory. He learned the Zendar's reliance on flanking maneuvers, the Ikrani's vulnerability to sonic attacks, the Skaran's weakness to extreme heat. His mind became a battleground, not of fear and doubt, but of strategy and cunning. He understood that to defeat these enemies, they needed more than just brute strength. They needed to outsmart them. His dedication did not go unnoticed. Sergeant Keller, impressed by Eddie's quick grasp of alien warfare, made a surprise announcement. From this day forward, Keller boomed, "Recruit Eddie will be your squad leader." A wave of murmurs swept through the ranks. Eddie, surprised but determined, stepped forward. He knew he had much to prove. Becoming squad leader was a double-edged sword. On one hand, it was an honor, a recognition of his abilities. On the other hand, it meant shouldering the weight of responsibility for his squad mates' lives. To make matters worse, not everyone was happy with Keller's decision. Whispers followed Eddie. Doubts lingered in the eyes of some squad members. "He's just a rookie," sneered Corporal Jackson, a burly veteran soldier who clearly felt passed over. "What's he know about fighting aliens?" Eddie ignored the taunts. He focused on the task at hand. He led his squad through increasingly complex combat simulations. He applied his knowledge of the enemy, formulating strategies and adapting to changing circumstances. His squad started winning, not always, but enough to turn heads. Even Jackson had to grudgingly acknowledge Eddie's growing competence. Still, Eddie couldn't shake off a nagging sense of self-doubt. The ghosts of his past haunted him. He remembered being bullied as a kid, never measuring up. He couldn't afford to fail now, not with the fate of humanity hanging in the balance. The pressure mounted. Eddie pushed himself harder, determined to prove himself worthy of the leadership thrust upon him. He spent sleepless nights poring over alien battle tactics, neglecting his own well-being. The weight of responsibility pressed down on him. He saw the doubt in the eyes of some of his squad mates, heard the whispers questioning his abilities. One evening, after a particularly frustrating training exercise, Eddie found himself alone in the mess hall. Exhaustion gnawed at him, but even more so, a deep-seated fear of failure. The faces of his squad mates looking to him for guidance flashed before his eyes. What if he wasn't good enough? What if he led them to their deaths? He slammed his fist on the table, the sound echoing in the empty hall. He was startled by a voice behind him. Tough day? It was Addison, a quiet but observant member of his squad. She had a knack for knowing when something was wrong. Addison sat down opposite Eddie, her gaze steady and understanding. She didn't pry, but her presence was a comfort. "It's not easy," she said finally, her voice soft but firm. "Being responsible for others. It takes courage to lead." Her words struck a chord within Eddie. He hadn't realized how much he needed someone to acknowledge his burden. He poured out his heart to Addison, confessing his fears and insecurities. Addison listened patiently, then said, "You're not the scared kid you used to be, Eddie. You've faced every challenge head-on. You've earned your place here." Her words were like a lifeline to a drowning man. Eddie felt a surge of gratitude for her friendship, for her unwavering belief in him. He realized he wasn't alone in this fight. He had his squad and he had Addison. He would not let them down. The final trial arrived, a grueling test of everything they had learned. Eddie, his confidence renewed, addressed his squad. "We've trained hard. We know our enemy. We fight as one." His voice, though still touched with nerves, resonated with newfound authority. He laid out his strategy, assigning roles based on each squad member's strengths. The simulation commenced. Waves of Zendar, Ikrani, and Skaran holograms charged at them. Eddie directed his squad with precision. He anticipated enemy movements, exploited their weaknesses, and turned their own tactics against them. The simulation ended in a resounding victory. Even Sergeant Keller nodded in approval. As Eddie looked at his squad, their faces flushed with victory, he knew he had found his place. He wasn't the scared kid anymore. He was a leader. He was ready for the real battle. He was ready to defend his planet.